Welcome to the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, WHMIS, video. WHMIS is an information system designed to provide you with information about hazardous materials you may encounter in the workplace. WHMIS became the law in 1988 and was implemented in Ontario by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, WHMIS regulation, and Canada-wide under federal legislation. In February 2015, the federal government published a new regulation called the Hazardous Products Regulation and amended the Hazardous Product Act to implement the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, GHS. GHS is a system that defines and classifies the hazards of chemical products as well as communicates information on health and safety through labels and safety data sheets, SDS. It is published in a book referred to as the Purple Book by the United Nations. The purpose of GHS is to unify the classification of chemicals and to provide improved consistency of hazards information globally in order to reduce confusion in identifying product labels of hazardous chemicals and their proper usage in different countries. Countries such as the United States, Mexico, Europe, and China all have adopted the GHS layout. WHMIS 2015 legislation was implemented in June 2015 with a transitional period of 3 years for manufacturers, suppliers, and companies to transform WHMIS to the new WHMIS 2015. The transition was completed by December 1st, 2018. There are 3 enhancements to the following WHMIS components: the hazard classifications, labels, and safety data sheets. Each component is designed to educate employees about hazardous materials and products in the workplace. We will now take the time to go over the WHMIS components. Under WHMIS, there are 2 major hazard groups, physical and health. Each group includes hazard classes, 26 in total, that have specific hazardous properties. The first 5 hazard classes categorized under the physical hazard group are as follows: explosives, flammable gases, flammable aerosols, flammable liquids, flammable solids. The next 5 classes are gases under pressure, organic peroxides, corrosive to metals, pyrophoric liquids, pyrophoric solids. The last 6 classes are self-heating substances, self-reactive substances, substances which, in contact with water, emit flammable gases, oxidizing liquids, oxidizing solids, oxidizing gases, totaling 16 hazard classes within the physical hazard group. The 10 health classes that are classified under the health hazard group are acute toxicity, skin corrosion irritation, serious eye damage eye irritation, respiratory or skin sensitization, germ cell mutagenicity, carcinogenicity, reproductive toxicology, target organ systemic toxicity, single exposure, target organ systemic toxicity, repeated exposure, and aspiration toxicity. Additionally, there are 2 environmental classes that fall under the environmental hazard group. These are products that are hazardous to the aquatic environment and the ozone layer. The federal government did not adopt the environmental hazard group and its classes from GHS into WHMIS 2015. WHMIS has a total of 10 symbols. These symbols contain hazard images bordered with a red diamond-like shape called pictograms. Located at the bottom of the screen is the addition of the WHMIS 1988 Biohazard Infectious Materials symbol. Each symbol will now be discussed in detail. The first pictogram is the gas cylinder. This symbol falls under the physical hazard group and indicates that the material poses an explosion danger due to the gas being held under pressure in a cylinder. The container could also potentially explode if it's dropped or heated. Precautions to take when handling gas cylinders are to handle it with care, avoid dropping the container, and keep this material away from potential sources of ignition. Also make sure that the container is secure during transportation, storage, or use. The next pictogram is the flame. This symbol is a physical hazard communicating that the material is a potential fire hazard and will burn, as well as may cause a fire when exposed to heat, sparks, or flames as a result of friction. Precautions to take when handling flammable materials are to keep the substance away from heat sources and other combustible materials. Never smoke when you're working with or near this material, and store substances in the appropriate location, such as the flammable cabinet, bunkers, or approved waste container. And if decanting flammable liquid into another container, ensure that the container is properly bonded and grounded before pouring. Next is the flame over circle pictogram. This material poses a fire and/or combustible risk in the presence of flammable or combustible materials and may cause fire when it comes into contact with combustible material. Precautions to take when handling oxidizing material are to keep the material away from ignition sources such as candles, Bunsen burners, and combustible materials. The corrosion pictogram. This symbol indicates that the material causes severe eye and skin irritation upon contact and tissue damage with prolonged contact. This material may also be harmful if inhaled. Precautions to take when handling corrosive materials are to avoid skin and eye contact by wearing all necessary protective equipment, such as gloves and/or safety glasses, and avoid inhalation by using well-ventilated areas or wearing proper respiratory protection. The last physical hazard pictogram is the exploding bomb. This symbol warns that the material poses an explosion danger due to chemical reactions. It can be self-reactive, and the container may explode if it is heated or dropped. When you see a chemical with an exploding bomb symbol on it, avoid mixing it with other chemicals and keep it away from potential sources of ignition. Now we will move on to the 4 pictograms that are classified under the health hazard group. The skull and crossbones pictogram is a substance that is potentially fatal and may cause permanent damage if it is inhaled or swallowed. Precautions to take with materials identified with the skull and crossbones symbol is to handle it with extreme caution, wear proper personal protective equipment, and avoid inhalation. The next symbol to introduce is the health hazard pictogram. This symbol warns that the substance is poisonous and is immediately dangerous to health. It also may be fatal or cause permanent damage as a result of repetitive exposure. Some precautions you would take when handling health hazard material are to use material as directed. Avoid contact with skin or eyes and inhalation by wearing proper personal protective equipment. The exclamation mark pictogram communicates that the substance causes irritation to the body, such as the eye and skin. It may also be a sensitizer which produces an allergic reaction to a chemical. Some precautions to take when handling substances with the exclamation mark on them is to avoid mixing with other chemicals and to avoid contact on the face and body. The last symbol classified under the health hazard group is biohazardous infectious material. This material may cause serious disease resulting in illness and/or possibly could be fatal. Some precautions to take when handling biohazard material are to take every measure to avoid contamination. Handle the material only when fully protected and use routine practices. Lastly, the environmental pictogram is the only icon represented in the environmental hazard group. This substance may be hazardous to the aquatic environment from either an acute or long-term perspective. Although Canada did not adopt this symbol, you may see this pictogram on imported products and safety data sheets, SDS. A precaution for handling this substance is to avoid pouring the substance into the sink or near sewers. Labeling is the second major component to WHMIS. The two main kinds of labels are supplier and workplace. According to the Hazardous Product Regulations, a supplier label must contain 7 detailed items of information about the product and its hazard. The first 4 required items of information on the WHMIS supplier labels are product identifier. This is the identification of a material. Signal word. These are words to alert the reader of potential hazards, for example, warning or danger. Pictograms are the new WHMIS icons indicating the type of potential hazard. Hazard statement, which describes the nature of the hazards by the product using standardized phrases. Precautionary statement, standardized phrases used to describe measures to be taken when using or being exposed to the product. Supplier's identifier. This is the name, address, and telephone number of the supplier, usually located at the bottom of the labels. And supplement label information are additional details based on the classification of the product. Here are examples of WHMIS supplier and workplace labels. All products are required to have a supplier label attached, and the content provided must be clearly legible, containing the 7 detailed information listed previously. These labels are available upon request through the Keaton Store and the Health and Safety Department. Workplace labels require the following information: product identifier, signal word, danger or warning, pictogram, hazard identification, personal protective equipment, and other information. Workplace labels are required when a hazardous material is produced in the workplace for the use in the workplace, a hazardous material is decanted from its original container into another, and the original supplier label is unreadable or missing. It is important that workplace labels are used on containers after substances are transferred from another container. This is to provide consistency and clear communication to other workers of the potential hazards contained in the substance. The last major component in WHMIS are the Safety Data Sheets, or SDS. SDS is a summary document that provides detailed information about a product's properties, its hazards, and how to prevent overexposure. The SDS has 16 required sections. The required sections for SDS are identification, hazardous identification, composition, information on ingredients, first aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storage, exposure controls, personal protection, physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicological information, ecological information, disposal considerations, transportation information, regulatory information, and other information. The safety data sheets do not have an expiration date unless the supplier becomes aware of any significant new data. Therefore, any changes to the hazardous product classification in a category, storage and handling, or any changes to protection against the hazard, the SDS is required to be updated within 90 days by the suppliers once they become aware of these changes. Remember, refer to the SDS if you need further information about a particular chemical product, such as first aid. Hard copies of the SDSs can be found in the yellow WHMIS binder located in the main and custodial office. Copies of the yellow WHMIS duotang containing a list of chemical inventories for secondary schools are located in the Arts, Science, and Technology departments. In addition, SDSs are maintained online and can be retrieved electronically through the Internet from the board's tendered company. The following is a summary of the important information about WHMIS. There are 2 major hazard groups: physical with 16 classes and health with 10 classes. There are 10 symbols in total, 9 pictograms with the addition of WHMIS 1988 biohazard symbols. The supplier labels contain detailed information about the product, and the board-approved workplace labels are to be used and can be obtained by the Keaton Store and the Health and Safety Department. The safety data sheet requires 16 sections and needs to be updated within 90 days by the suppliers once they become aware of any changes to the hazardous product classification in a category, storage and handling, or any changes to protection against the hazard. Before handling any product, it is important to read labels, wear required protective equipment, and remember to always put safety first.